Great. So, thank you everyone for attending this today. I'm Catherine Hill. I am the Talent Strategy and Operations Manager here at iCAN. We're very excited today to be hosting this online South Asian Heritage Month panel. So it'll be a really good kind of free-flowing, interactive conversation. So if you have any kind of questions during the panel session, feel free to put them in the chat. Hopefully they'll be picked up throughout the conversation, but also we'll use them as a Q&A at the end. And then if we don't manage to get through everyone's questions, we'll kind of follow up with the speakers and be able to share that back through our blogs. Before I pass over to Anna, who will be helping to moderate today, if you're not a member of iCAN, feel free to follow us on LinkedIn, sign up as a member to keep up to date with all our different events and what we have going on. We've got lots coming up in September and October, so there's surely something for everyone. But I am going to pass over to Anna now, who will be moderating the panel.
Thanks, Catherine, and welcome everybody. I'm really honoured to be moderating this conversation today with three incredible panellists who you're going to meet very shortly. And yes, I know it's August the 29th and technically outside of South Asian Heritage Month. But let's be honest, if anyone can stretch a celebration, it's us. Call it Indian timing, fashionably late, but I can guarantee we will still bring you the spice and the conversation. So actually, from next year, it's going to change dates if you haven't heard yet. So South Asian Heritage Month is going to officially move to July, which is a really good shift for anyone who runs ERGs. You'll know planning is notoriously difficult. Corporate calendars are notoriously difficult to get into. So actually, I think it's a really good thing that will help us to celebrate even bigger and better next year. So let's dive into the conversation and introduce our panelists. So we have Hamza. Hi, Hamza.
Hi all. How are you doing?
Oh, good, thank you. And Uzma and Arti. Hi, everyone. So everyone should know about this year's theme by now, Roots to Roots. And I'd really love to know to each of you, if you could give firstly a little intro to your background and where you're from, that'd be great, just so that everybody knows. But how has that theme shaped your identity in the workplace? It'd be great to know from each of you what your experience is. Let's start with you, Hamza.
Okay, sure. Yeah, it's great to be here. So thanks very much for inviting me along. So I am a commercial partner at DAC Beechcroft. So a lawyer, excuse me for that. But I guess like my background, both my parents are Kashmiri. So the sort of disputed part of Kashmir. So didn't really feel Indian or Pakistani. Very much felt Kashmiri and Kashmiri and spent a lot of time, I think, sort of protesting outside embassies and all that sort of stuff sort of growing up. So I think career-wise, there was always a sense that law would be quite interesting because fighting injustice was something that I thought was really important. So it was always a bit of a theme. And I guess talking about roots to roots, when it comes to identity in the workplace, I think it was probably less of a theme for me. It was probably a bit quiet for me. I don't think I ever really necessarily felt like it was an important thing that I felt like I needed to talk about in the workplace, and I appreciate everyone's really different on that. But certainly for me, it was there, and I've got a number of sort of insights looking back now in terms of career as to how that identity piece has probably shaped me. But at the time, I didn't really think too much about it. I just was sort of working and doing my thing and trying to be as good as I could be.
But you at least ticked the parents box of lawyer, so you went into an acceptable field.
I'm not sure. They wanted me to be a doctor, so ultimately, it never really quite worked out for them. But
at least it wasn't marketing like me, because that's definitely not one of those. And how about you, Uzma? What does it mean to you?
So I guess just by way of introduction, I work for Zurich Insurance as a business oversight lead. I also co-chair our cultural awareness network as well. Not clearly as impressive as Hamza, but both my parents are from Pakistan. I'm first generation, so I was born and bred here. So I guess from roots to roots, what does the theme mean to me? I guess it hits home for me. I grew up in a space where you don't draw attention to yourself and you blend in, and you don't want to look or sound different. But over the last decade or so, the industry has become a place where it's okay to bring your whole self to work. I guess that's been baked into me when it's come to my leadership style, how I work with others, how I suppose I use my voice when it comes to D&I, and that's become more prevalent as I start to bring my whole self to work. And I suppose that's also led me into that whole kind of co-chair space when it comes to the D&I network that I lead. And it's about raising awareness when it comes to that kind of cultural piece, but also the experience bit. But I also want to have some fun along the way, and that's kind of what I brought in terms of the lens to the network within Zurich. And I suppose kind of that final point, just that kind of reflection piece, without being too ick, would be it's really important to remember where you've come from. Remember what's kind of what's kind of stemmed from who you are in terms of our heritage, and try not to kind of rationalize that or be too deep, and you don't have to blend in, and it's okay to own who you are and where you've come from. That makes sense.
Yeah, and I think that point about making it fun as well, because this can easily be a very heavy topic when you're talking about
100%.
anything race, ethnicity. And a lot of people are still scared of having these conversations. So I think to help make it a bit more accessible and to normalize these things, yes, it's not all about the samosas at Diwali, but actually food gets everyone through the door. It's a common thing that everybody has, you know, an appetite for, no pun intended. But I think it's really important to just bring that element of fun to it as well, because actually there's a lot to celebrate as well as the heavy stuff as well to balance it out. So that's great. And how about you, Artie?
So, hi everyone, I'm Artie Ledbetter. I'm the head of tax here at Brit. So when I first heard the theme, I think very similar to Usma, you know, my parents are first generation immigrants. They moved over here from Africa. And so when I heard the word root, you know, I immediately thought of the journey that sort of brought them here to this country when they were very, very young. You know, they came here seeing it as an opportunity to work, you know, build their future, build their family. And you know, from a very young age, which I think, you know, a lot of second generation immigrants have heard is, you know, that story of them, and how they face many challenges, and they face them, you know, with a real willingness to graft, with resilience, taking those opportunities, never taking anything for granted. And, you know, for me, sort of reflecting on this and, you know, reflecting on the theme of this panel, it feels like to me that a lot of those, I would say, sort of behaviours and values were instilled in me at a really, really young age. And I'm so grateful for that, and you know, my heritage, because I feel like that has really sort of been the bedrock of my career and really sort of stood me well in terms of getting where I am today. So yeah, that's probably what it means for me.
And I think it sounds like between the three of you, a lot of that is about the storytelling of actually everybody's got their own unique journey. And actually South Asian Heritage Month themselves, they answered this question really beautifully in their official launch video. I don't know if anybody's had the chance to see it, but it's a great example of how storytelling can really elevate everybody's voices, because a lot of the time we've got all these stories, we've got all these different journeys, but people don't really know about it because it's not something that you often talk about in the workplace. So I think I'll share a link in the chat, but it's really well worth a watch because it's got voices across different generations, different industries, and it's a really great reminder of all these stories. They really matter and they deserve to be told and heard. So it was a really nice way of bringing that to life. So I'll drop it in the chat for you to check out if you've not had a chance to yet. But all of these things that you've said so far, they sound really positive, but I know that you can also face challenges in the workplace, in a professional space, that sometimes being South Asian, it can be both a strength and a challenge. Have you had any moments in your career where your background has felt like either a strength or a challenge? Welcome to you.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of going back to that kind of original point that I'd made around blending in. I suppose I grew up in a predominantly white suburban area. I was one of three people of colour at school. When I joined the workforce, there weren't many people that looked like me at all different levels. And I suppose it's that over the last decade, you can bring you and your whole self to work. And It's more over the last 5 years, I felt more comfortable in doing that, but it still comes in that kind of internal challenge. And I guess I have to actively work through that quite regularly. It's that kind of imposter syndrome in a way, that you're not good enough, you're different, you don't fit the mold. And I suppose for me, it's fine having that imposter syndrome, but it's recognizing and acknowledging that I also have a right to be here. I think that's probably the biggest challenge that I've had and that I have to kind of consciously work through, because I think we're still in a generation of, we've grown up a bit different, and that bringing your whole self has come kind of like halfway through our lives.
Yeah, and I think the thing that I've always thought to be conscious of on that particular front is that sometimes our internal dialogue can tell us we're different and can tell us to feel different, but actually it's on us to break through that, and actually break the chain of feeling that way and using that difference as your superpower. It sounds cliche, I know, but actually that difference can help you to stand out. So if you can leverage that, it can actually be something that really helps you as a USP rather than something that holds you back. How about you, Hansa?
Well, I totally echo what you just said about the sort of strength and difference, definitely. But I just remember, like, really early on in my career, when if you're trying to get into law, you have to do a load of vacation schemes, get rejected all the time, they screen you. My grades weren't that good, so I really had to have a little bit of a story. So I ended up going into sort of a niche area in healthcare law initially. And I remember being on a vacation scheme, and I spotted that there was a partner who obviously was South Asian background, and there was a social event, and I remember, people were all sort of drinking and chatting to each other, and I went over and I was like, really nice to meet you, where are you from? And it's a sort of question that now I think everyone's like, you can't, yeah, well, hang on a minute, what do you mean, where are you from? Well, it's so loaded. But like, genuinely trying to it very naively just like foster a bit of, okay, I'm brown, you're brown, let's chat about, like, maybe some of our kind of stuff in common. He was like, I'm from Leeds, and like literally like stony faced. So I was like, but really, like, it literally just shut the conversation down. And I was like, didn't know where to go with that. I sort of thought that that might be a bit of a strength play, to just relate to someone that may have come from a different background, and just to understand how he had found it in terms of the journey in law. And we were literally the only two people that perhaps were of an ethnic minority in quite a large group, but there was none of that. I think things have changed now, and perhaps, like, maybe people are more open to conversations. But I think, yeah, being kind of comfortable in your own skin to talk about your identity has been a real power, I think, because, allowing people into those discussions and making them feel safe and comfortable because I think it is interesting for a lot of people to understand these things. It's just, I think for a lot of people, they don't necessarily know how to broach it. So I think there's a real strength in providing that ability to communicate in that way, and allow people, even if it is a bit clumsy sometimes, to just be able to talk about these things.
Yeah, I think developing that cultural fluency really helps. I must admit that whenever anybody asks me where I'm from, my first answer is always Manchester, because I identify as a Mancunian first and foremost. But do you think it's any different? There's a question in the chat from Azzy about being first generation versus second generation, and how that impacts on how you can fit in the workplace. Do you think that makes a difference, Hamza?
Definitely, I think it makes a difference. I think I guess it's one of those where I can only speak from my own experience, where actually, my grandparents came here, settled in Manchester. Then, my parents were both professionals. My dad was a successful public lawyer. My mum was a GP. I had privilege, I had loads of privilege that I think, allowed me to feel comfortable and everything else, because if you have that, I think, as a sort of a platform, it perhaps makes you feel less like another in the workplace, where you've had a lot of opportunities. So I think absolutely it's very different depending on what generation you're coming from.
So does anybody have any recommendations or tips on how you could feel more at home in the insurance industry in the UK? It's quite a tough one, I guess, because everyone's situation is going to be different. But I think from what everybody said so far, it is about how you use that difference rather than
Yeah.
trying to kind of assimilate and become like everyone else and
Yeah.
have a homogenous workplace. It's actually, what can you bring? Because I know that when I've co-chaired our cultural awareness network, I've been seeking out people with those different stories to amplify their voices, to tell their stories, to give a different perspective on things. So I think, Azzy, what I'd say is, if you have a cultural network within your workplace, see what they have to offer, how they can support you, if there's anything that you can do to support them and to help tell a more diverse range of stories. Because it's not always about fitting in. Sometimes it's about how you can use that to stand out. So obviously, in the workplace, and to Azzy's question as well, not everybody will be able to understand your background and your cultural identity. How do you think you can really honor that cultural identity in a professional environment where you're surrounded by people who just don't get it? Artie, have you got a view on that?
So this is a really interesting question. When we did one of sort of the prep discussions, I think the thing that immediately kind of struck me was the pronunciation of my name, and you might have already picked up on it earlier. And it's an interesting one because it's always been a bit of a pet peeve of mine. And for as long as I can remember, I've always introduced myself to people as Artie, like anglicized pronunciation, and kind of took away, I guess, the otherness, the difficult questions, the need to try and fit in or explain. I know now I'm talking about, I'm just sort of remembering a time at school where there was an Indian teacher who did pronounce it correctly. I remember my friends just taking a mick out of me for, the whole year we had her. And obviously this is something that translated into the workplace. And for a long, long time, there was just never any mention of it, never any mention of a different pronunciation. But more recently, it's definitely something that I've become more comfortable with. And as Uzma said, the shift to feeling much more comfortable bringing your whole self to work. And actually, when I joined Brit, it sort of coincided with the time that there was an encouragement to put the pronunciation of names in the signature. And although, I'm not expecting anyone to kind of get the full pronunciation right, because it is very, very difficult, it at least sparked the conversation to be around, well, actually, my name's Artie. I know it's difficult to pronounce. So, more than happy for you to call me Artie. That's okay. But it just, as I said, it sparks that conversation. And actually, it is really meaningful to me, right? So, my husband is British. It took him about 10 years to be able to pronounce my name, I would say 80% correctly. But good on him. He managed it for the wedding. And what's even more nice is that, our daughter now, she just started talking, now is pronouncing it correctly because she can hear him saying it. And I think that's just such a wonderful kind of, piece of my heritage that, we can remember through work, through professionalism, but also at home as well. And it really kind of translates through.
And thank you for shining a light on the fact that I defaulted to the northern accent and saying Artie straight away without even asking you. But yeah, I totally get that it's quite a difficult thing to correct people as well once they've said it wrong. So definitely using, just in the same way people are really comfortable using their pronouns in their signature now, that there's also a site called My Name Is, where you can record your name and people can click on a link in your signature to actually hear how to say it as well. So that's a really great way of subtly introducing it into the conversation too.
Yeah, and as I said, I'm not expecting anyone to kind of, as you said, like get it right all the time. And people have known me for a long time. I've worked in insurance all my career, but it's just having that conversation and being able to tell that story.
Yeah, and I think also having that visibility just to educate others a bit more, to help them understand. LinkedIn is a brilliant way of doing that. So LinkedIn also has that sound tool on there where you can record your voice. But it's a really powerful platform because I think for South Asians particularly, that there's that stereotype, the unwritten stereotype of them being meek and mild and getting their head down and just getting the work done, but not really having that much of a voice. And I do think that personally, I feel that you need to be seen to be heard, and you need to be using these platforms. So even like sessions from today and South Asian Heritage Month, all these opportunities where we've got to share our story, do it. Use LinkedIn. Tell those stories. Share the things that are going on. These conversations that are happening, rather than keeping them in the four walls of kind of preaching to the converted, of people who already believe in all this. Use platforms like LinkedIn to share more, and to share these stories, and the conversations that are going on. So obviously there are still barriers in insurance today for professionals, but looking forward, are there any changes that you'd like to see in the next 5 years? Is there anything specifically, Arti, that you would like to see in the next 5 years, in terms of changes in the insurance industry?
Very nice. So I think we all kind of alluded to, clearly there's been huge progress, right, in the last, let's say 30 or so years, but that doesn't mean to say we can aspire to, set a really high bar for ourselves and want to see, more improvement, more feeling of inclusivity, and that people can really sort of embrace their whole selves. And I guess, coming from a different workplace and seeing a few different things, there are certain things that I have seen, which are, I think, quite, I would say, small things in terms of the day-to-day, that I think really improve people's feeling of feeling heard, feeling included, feeling seen. And actually, there's some really amazing examples of stuff that, our workplace have done. So one of the things that I think is quite interesting is the holiday days, so public holiday days, because clearly they tend to revolve around sort of the Christian calendar, given that we're here in the UK. And one thing that I think I'm conscious of is that a lot of celebrations and culturally significant days, but lots of communities happen outside of that calendar. So I guess being flexible or being mindful about those dates and what that then means for people in terms of holiday, flexible working, particularly if it comes, around timing like things like Ramadan, where people need to work flexible hours, and really acknowledging that, I think, is a really powerful thing to do. And certainly, at Brit, we actually had a suggestion from staff to ask that those sort of public holiday days are sort of removed and people can take them on any days that they feel are culturally significant to them. And it's been such a powerful thing, I think, in terms of just allowing people to really acknowledge that actually, for them, holiday days, time that they want to spend with their family, might not coincide with the sort of the usual holiday dates. And I think the other sort of second thing, which again was based on a piece of feedback, was around how we organise things like socials and events. So I think in particular, the insurance industry has a bit of a bad rep, I would say, around sort of like, the drinking culture, drinking events. And actually we had some direct feedback from people within our team that said, as a Muslim, I can't go to these events that are sort of that revolve around alcohol or drinking only events, and it means that I, basically blocked from attending these sort of social networking events. And actually, as part of when I was part of the social committee, we sort of reconfigured the social calendar to ensure that we had a variety of events, some also happening during the day, some that were kind of more event activity based sort of socials, to ensure that they felt comfortable attending the events and they had the opportunity to do so. And a lot of people actually said it's one of the only times that they've felt comfortable and able to attend those type of events. So I think a lot of this really comes down to just being really mindful and listening to people and understanding their point of view. And obviously we can't accommodate everything all of the time and make everything perfect, but I think just trying and being really mindful and thoughtful about how you can try and improve people's sort of day-to-day experience of the workplace goes a huge way in terms of making them feel like they are heard, they are seen, they're part of a team.
100%. And the bank holiday flexibility is something that we've actually formalized now at Aviva. So whilst I was co-chairing Aviva Origins, it was one of the things that we were hearing a lot from our members, that actually we don't need Christmas Day off, we don't need Easter Monday off, we want to have Ramadan off, or to be able to celebrate a Jewish event or a Buddhist event. Like, there are so many different festivals that are not marked in the calendar, and we actually managed to lobby for official change to our policy. So now you can use those for whichever day is suitable, more suitable and culturally appropriate. So I think those kind of things, it might feel like quite a small thing to a business, but actually the impact that it has and what we hear back from our members is huge. It means so much to people. And things like also, so I work in a creative studio where we create content for Aviva socials as well. And marking those different occasions on your social calendar just makes people feel seen, and making sure that because I think one of the challenges that I always have felt is that there's not that representation at the more senior levels. And where there is a representation, you want to see those people on your socials so that actually you can resonate with a wider customer base. And so we now have actual messages that we develop for each of these festivals that we celebrate within Aviva. But I think the big watch point is that is that you have to make sure, if you are wishing somebody a happy Ramadan or a happy Hanukkah, then you are actually doing something internally to celebrate that as well, so that your people feel like it is authentic and you've got that integrity there, and it's not a performative message which would have the opposite effect. So lots of work, I think, still to be done, but the fact that you are in Brit, you're already doing the bank holiday thing, and it's happening more and more. It's really great to see, really encouraging. So what I'd like to find out a bit more about is that I'm sure all of us here have experienced some stereotypes and some unconscious bias amongst the people that we work with. How have you responded to that? Have you had experience of it, and how have you responded to it if you have, both in your own experiences but also when you're trying to advocate for others as well? Uzma, have you got any experience of that?
Yeah, I think personally, a lot of that piece around unconscious bias or stereotypes, it comes down to intent. So I've had the whole don't bring pakora to the potluck, or you're not brown enough for being a brown girl. And I think some of it comes down to, is there malice intended? Yes, no, fine. But I also think there's a space where we're in a place now where we've got such a culture where it can go down quite an extreme route where people are afraid to speak or say anything for fear of offence. However, that's not to say that we don't recognise when there's times where it's not a light-hearted poke. And there have been times over the last however many years that I've been working where there has been a more serious angle to what I've experienced. So things like, do you think your heritage is holding you back in your career? Should you think about changing your name? Or you look foreign, I bet you can't speak English. And it's these times where you know there's more to it, right? So you stand up for yourself and you call it out, because we need a culture of speaking up also. So there's a bit around that. I mean, to be honest, I get more stick these days for being Scottish than Asian, if I'm entirely just to dig it down a notch in terms of the messaging. But I think when things happen, you get a gut feel as to the intention. And if you're not in a position to stand up for yourself, then how can you expect to advocate for others? And I think that's the key messaging. So it's doing things in the right way, and it's knowing when there's more than just a light-hearted poke.
Definitely. And I think in your role as co-chair as well, it's really important to have people like you who are willing to stand up and to kind of where something needs to be said, because often these passing remarks might be made. It might be a microaggression, it might not be, but actually somebody needs to call it out for something to be done about it. So I think it's really important to have people who are willing to raise their head above the parapet when needed. Michelle in the chat's got a question. As a Pakistani Christian herself and a first-generation migrant in the UK, with obviously an anglicised name, and I know all about that, Michelle, I often face skepticism about both my name and my religious background, and it can be exhausting to repeatedly explain yourself in that situation. So how do you strike a balance between sharing your story and to choose to ignore those ignorant remarks?
That's such a good question, and I wish if I had that complete answer at this point. I completely would. I know when it depends on the person that you're dealing with and how you approach it. It's that whole piece that we talked about earlier. Where are you from? No, where are you really from? So there's a bit around that. And then I guess it's, are you comfortable? And the expectation shouldn't be on you. If you look a bit different, it doesn't mean that we're in a place where to speak about it or to be able to want to share our stories. So there's a respect thing there as well. Would we go up to someone that wasn't from a diverse background and ask in the way that we're approached these topics? Probably not. So I guess it is, a lot of it comes down to intuition and what you are willing to share or not, and also protecting your own space. Does that make sense? And does that answer the question? I feel like I fluffed that answer a little bit.
No, I think that makes sense. And Michelle, having experienced that myself a lot, when people ask me my name and I say it's Anna, and then like, yeah, but what's your real name? Like thinking that I have an English name and an Indian name, but that is my real name. You know, it's what's on my birth certificate. And actually, my parents bought me a couple of years ago, because I was telling them about this conversation. They bought me a coin that used to be in circulation in India that was called the Anna. So it actually says ANNA on it. It was an actual coin. And I got it put onto a necklace that I sometimes now wear at events, because I know people are going to ask me, and then I show them that coin and it gives me a story to tell them about. Actually, my name does have roots in India, and it's not just because my dad happened to fancy a newsreader called Anna at the time I was born. It was because there was also something behind it as well. But I think that sometimes, like, if you can put your story out there, so there are, like, for example, on LinkedIn, I've done a piece once about there was a campaign that was going around called I think it was called This Little Girl Is, and it's all about kind of how you grew up and how you felt as you about your identity. And sometimes if you can put something like that out there for people to see, it might discourage some of those questions because they've seen it already. So maybe, Michelle, it might be an interesting thing that you can share in a more public forum, if you're comfortable to do so, so that you can refer them to that link if people are asking you that question over and over again. But I also think that there's something quite nice about a genuine curiosity. If people are asking from a genuinely, you know, they just want to find out more, I think that's okay, because actually that's how people are going to learn more as well. So so I kind of take it as a compliment that they want to know more about my identity and my background. So what about in the workplace? There are in other communities, I find it's very easy to talk about allies for the LGBTQ plus community, for example. Everyone's very well versed in that, but not so much in the ethnicity and race space. So do you think that allies and leadership teams actually play a part in improving inclusion and that representation of South Asian talent in our industry? Arti, what do you think about that?
It's a really interesting question when you kind of phrased it like that, you know, we often use that word allies a lot in some of the other I&D spaces, but you don't really tend to hear it a lot. You know, when you're talking about sort of different people's sort of cultural backgrounds. But I guess I would probably think about it from the lens of, you know, ultimately what is an ally relationship trying to do? And it's all around sort of mentorship and support. And when I sort of reflect back on my career, particularly around sort of the earlier stages, I've had so much support from a variety of mentors, variety of levels, backgrounds, at various different stages of my career. And actually that has been so meaningful in, you know, various sort of, I would say, leaps and promotions and changing jobs, changing firms. And actually, I kind of feel like it's a bit of a virtuous cycle, because now, you know, I'm potentially in a position where I've got a bit more of a platform and privileged position where I'm able to kind of have a similar impact, be a mentor, you know, do events like this and be part of sort of cultural networks back at Brit. And I really feel like you've got to pay it forward, right? And when you kind of start to see the scale and the progress that we're making, I really do feel like you might not call it allyship, but really that mentorship and support really is kind of flowing through organizations, and in time you will start to see that representation. And, you know, I've already had comments from, you know, people that are sort of newer in the workplace about being a mentor, and you know, for them seeing someone in a more senior position, you know, within the finance team, they're like, actually, it makes such a big difference to see someone, you know, Hasmo, as you said, that looks like me, that potentially has a similar background to me, has experienced similar challenges, and someone that I feel like I can go and talk to, or, you know, I can see them during events, I can see them acknowledging their background and their heritage. And I feel like it's such a powerful thing. And I think we've talked about it before, you know, we have made progress, but there's still more progress to go, right? We're going to set the bar really high here. And I think, you know, it's just probably more of a call for us all to be a lot more sort of active in this space, you know, telling our own stories, telling people about, you know, some of the challenges that we face, but also a lot of the sort of the positives and the strengths that we bring to the table as well.
Most definitely. I think that active is the key word there, because there's awareness is kind of one side of it, but actually, how do we move from leadership teams having awareness to actually acting upon that? So sponsoring the talent, to challenge bias, to create those inclusive cultures. It's about moving to action. And also, when you're in those more privileged positions, how do you use that to not only climb up the ladder yourself, but hold down a hand to pull others up a few rungs as well? Because that, I think sometimes there's that feeling that there's only enough space for one brown person on this team. We can't have more than one represented at a more senior level, but actually there's enough room for all of us. We're not competing against each other. It's how we also help each other out. Hamza, you look like you wanted to chip in there.
I was just thinking about what the discussion, and I think the culture point is critical. So when I look around the DAC Beechcraft across senior leadership team, it's, you know, that diverse representation is there, and is there kind of just quite quietly. It's not, I don't think it's necessarily about sort of as being about banging the drum. Actually, it's about having that representation, and then I think for others then to think, well, actually, of course, you know, based on merit, this is a culture where I can thrive. And I think I've always, you know, I was talking a little bit earlier about that whole, the identity piece, and whether it's really, you know, shaped career and everything else. It hasn't necessarily been a big thing for me, probably because I think the environment, certainly, you know, when I moved to DAC Beechcraft, was one that I think was all about merit, and the culture was very inclusive. You know, there are networks that are set up to celebrate and embrace different cultures, and you know, right across the board. So I think there's a bit around, yeah, this isn't just a sort of a tick box exercise. This is about a culture where, you know, you get to where you get to based on your merit, and it's a culture where everyone can thrive, whatever background you're from. You know, the bit around helping other people and giving that hand up, it's one where I think conceptually I always struggle with that, because it always feels a bit like, well, actually, isn't it just bias, just in a different way? And I completely get the stats would completely be, you know, against that argument when you look at how hard it is for people, I think, from ethnic minorities sometimes when they are seeking to progress in their careers, and the bias and the discrimination that's often faced. But it's almost like there's no perfect answers to solve that. For me, it's all about having a culture that facilitates a meritocracy, and for people to feel comfortable to be able to thrive and progress in their careers. I think we're lucky that we have that at our firm.
And that's a really interesting point, as I was going to say, because obviously, you know, you almost want to help everyone who is talented in the organization and afford them those opportunities. And that's definitely kind of how I feel as well, because, you know, on the flip side, there's also, you know, this point around gender, and, you know, again, a lot of women within the team that are kind of asking for mentorship and, you know, support as well. So, you know, to your point, in our sort of privileged role and position, we should be looking to kind of support all talent, and, you know, those that need that support and are asking for it.
Yeah, and also, Hamza, I think you raise an important point about banging that drum. I think we have to be conscious that we don't place an expectation on ethnically diverse people who are in these more senior roles to have to speak about their religion or their identity or the background, because actually, if you don't want to, you don't have to. It's not about kind of forcing people to feel like they have to do that, or there's something wrong if they don't, but just having that visual representation there does a job in itself, that if you can see it, you can be it, you know. So I think there's that too. So in terms of leadership then, so if there's anybody on the call today who is South Asian and they want to position themselves for a leadership role in the future, and they haven't got that cultural representation that you have, Hamza, how do you think a professional in that situation can position themselves in that organization? Who wants to take that?
I'm happy to kick it off, Anna. I mean, I think that the piece around sponsorship and mentors, I know you were saying, you know, in a situation where you don't necessarily have that person that's in a leadership position, but I think in the insurance space, there are, you know, it's vast in terms of, I think, the opportunities to connect and find people that are in leadership positions and that have had that experience. And I think we've got a number of those on this call that are absolutely in that place to be that sort of sponsor and mentor. And I think obviously all of these things are very fact specific in terms of the sorts of role you're going for, where you are in your career, your background and everything else. But I think there is a really good cohort of people that are absolutely vested in trying to help other people. And I think that the insurance space is collaborative in that way. So I think it's all about making connections, talking to people, and you know, gathering inputs from different sources. I think that can be hugely powerful and help you in your sort of day-to-day progress.
Definitely echo that, Hamza. I would say just, you know, be your own advocate. There's plenty of resources out there. You know, talked about insurance being, you know, such a collaborative space. There's lots of people out there that are sort of willing to support others and sort of on their career journey. And, you know, I'm thinking about examples like the Lloyd's Advanced Scheme. Like I know a lot of people at Brit that have been on that. I didn't go on that myself. I went on the women's scheme, and I thought it was just a brilliant leadership course at the end of the day. I had great coaching and mentorship from that, leadership training. So yeah, I would just say I do feel like there's a lot of opportunities out there. And if they're not being sort of presented to you and you hear about them, I would definitely go and advocate for yourself for them and, you know, try and seek them out.
Yeah, there are often a lot of untapped opportunities within your organization in terms of development. So first of all, seek those out because, you know, that's something that is already readily available to you. But then anyone who's here on this call today, being part of iCAN automatically is going to link you to a much wider network. So use the resources that iCAN are providing, subscribe to their emails, join their LinkedIn, follow them on LinkedIn. There's so many opportunities where you can actually connect and expand your network to learn from others, and to also kind of make sure that you're working in the right organization as well, because maybe if you haven't got that representation at the top, or you don't feel like the culture is as inclusive as you would like it to be, maybe it's not the right company for you. You know, there might be another one that's a better fit for you as well. So making connections across different organizations is also a good way to learn more about other organizations who do it well too. So and also I think owning your narrative is really important. So it's not always kind of waiting to be invited into a space. Sometimes you need to get your foot in the door yourself as well. So I think really owning it yourself, even on your social media channels where you're telling your story, make sure that rather than people having to make assumptions about you because they don't really know much about you, if you own what you're saying on there, you are in control of what people find out about you. And we can't make an assumption that your hard work is just going to speak for itself, because actually, how are people going to know about it unless you're speaking about it? And I think as South Asians as well, culturally, bragging is seen as very, you know, we don't want to be doing that. We don't want to be beating our own chest, but actually it's not about showing off. It's not about bragging. Actually, sometimes you have to share your skills and what you're really great at and what you've achieved, so that people know about it and they can see you more in that leadership position because they've seen the evidence of what you've done. So I would say just don't wait to be invited, claim that space yourself as well. So, okay, so let's say that somebody they feel stuck in their position, or they're unseen within the insurance sector. Have you got any advice that you could give to South Asian professionals who are in that position where they're kind of stuck in a rut? They feel like they're doing the same thing day in, day out, and they're not actually progressing. What can they do to actually progress within our sector? Uzma, it'd be interesting to hear from you in the sense that you've got a side hustle as well as co-chair as well. Is there anything that you can recommend from an ERG perspective, maybe, that could help your way out of that?
I think there's a couple of things. I think there's power in mentorship and coaching. So I think that's generally one. You need someone that's advocating for you, that's showing up for you. But I think the power of your network, and I'm not talking about senior leaders, I'm talking a real mix of people who you consider close, who are going to give you sound advice, challenge you where appropriate, nurture you, raise you up, show up for you. I think that plays a big part in development. It's given me a lot of specifically over the last 5 years, I would say, in terms of driving my development forward, challenging how I get involved in things, pushing myself out of my comfort zone, this situation being one of them. I think using the ERGs as well, because we're generally tapped into your kind of exec level. We do things like reverse mentoring. Mentoring's all about raising your profile, but I guess your career is yours to drive and push forward. And if you think you're unseen and that you're not getting what you need, it's what do you need to do to advocate for yourself and create a space for you and your development path.
And I think nobody listening to you today would guess that this is the first panel that you've done. And so the fact that you've put yourself out there and you're doing something that is a little bit different, that might scare you a little bit, but actually you'll find that when you've done it, how fulfilling that is, and actually how many people it helps just to hear your story and hear where you've come from. And you speak about mentors. Have you had any mentors before, or sponsors even, who've supported your journey, and have they helped you to overcome any of those barriers?
Yeah, for sure. I think I like a blend of, in my mentor, a coaching aspect. Don't bounce around a topic. Tell me what you think, and then I like to make my decision. I think a mentor, more recently, I've had a couple of really strong mentors in challenging my thinking. Is this actually what you want? Opening up the doors to other projects that create more visibility. This opportunity came through mentorship as well, because I built a connection with my co-chair at the time. So say yes to the opportunity, say yes to the advice, and I guess your journey is yours, and the mentoring piece really does support in that.
And I think also having somebody who's going to speak for you
Oh,
when you're not
100%.
around is invaluable as well, especially if it's in a sponsorship capacity, someone who is maybe more senior, who can open more doors as well from a progression perspective. Hamza, have you had any experience of those at all?
So I would say probably not directly, actually. I mean, it's one of those where I guess I feel sometimes it may just be sort of like what you come across in your day to day, and I haven't personally had anything like that I've come across.
Interesting, because so I think if you haven't got a formal setup within your organization, there are also external organizations like Moving Ahead, for example. They work with the 30% Club, who you might have heard of, on mentorship programs that go across different industries, on both the gender space and the ethnicity space. So I think it's always worth, if you feel like it's something that you would like to do, if you would like to get some mentorship, there are also ways outside of your company to pursue that as well. So something to also be aware of. So
Anna, one of the things that sort of struck me after thinking about it a bit more was one of the areas that we've worked on, particularly in health, where we look at leadership in the healthcare sector, was partnering with an organization that really helps support those in that area, and they're called Bravery in the Boardroom, and do a great job at working on that. The other thing, from a kind of completely different lens, is there are lots of different organizations that seem to be really good at connecting people into the industry, because again, particularly getting into law, it's so competitive trying to get over that first hurdle. And again, from a firm perspective, that's an organization that's perhaps less on the sort of exactly on point of what we're discussing, but really doing a really important job of being able to be a great funnel for those that come from lots of different backgrounds.
Yeah, 100%. And it's great to see that, Sadhna, you've also found a mentor through iCAN as well. So that's definitely a route to find one too. But yeah, it sounds like networks do underpin a lot of what we've talked about today. So it's about kind of using those relationships and leveraging what we're surrounded by. So final reflections then, if you could give one message to your younger self who is starting in the industry all those years ago as a South Asian professional, what would you say to the younger Uzma, Hasma and Aarti? Where would you go with that?
So mine would be yourself. I mean, that's the advice I always give everyone. And I think, reflections on this discussion, I think for people that's twofold, really. I think, firstly, not being afraid, to talk about your culture, talk about your heritage, and, not feeling like you have to hide that away. And then secondly, really having a think about what uniqueness and what strengths your culture and heritage bring, and really try and embrace those, because I think you'll be quite surprised about how much there is there, how much untapped resource that there is there.
Uzma, shall I go next? I mean, I would probably say tell myself to be a bit more forthcoming with those conversations around identity, where I think as I say, I think I've been pretty quiet about that going through my career, but actually knowing that can be really helpful both for yourself and for other people around you. In retrospect, hindsight's obviously 2020, but like I think if I go back, I probably would tell myself to do that, and also call out some of the nonsense that you have to deal with, where you might be feeling a bit too junior to be able to stand up to that moment where someone says, "Oh, I wouldn't stand next to you on the tube if you had a backpack on," just like nonsense like that that people might put down as a bit of banter when you're just saying, actually, no way. Like, I should never have just accepted that. So a little bit more around, backing yourself, I think, in those situations.
Lovely. And Uzma?
I think don't try and put yourself into that corporate box when the box isn't boxing. You do you, bring your whole self, and try and enjoy the ride, I guess.
Love that. So basically what we're all saying is that we shouldn't dim our light to fit in. It's about using your South Asian background to really stand out and to use that, because actually there's a lot that we bring, and we belong here, so we don't have to fight for that place. So don't feel like you need to. Have we got any questions in the chat? I haven't seen any more pop up yet, but if you do have any questions, do pop them into the chat, and we can ask our panelists before we get to the end. We've got a few more minutes yet, so if there's anything that you'd like to ask, any burning questions, feel free to do so. And yes, if you do want to connect on LinkedIn, drop your LinkedIn in the chat as well. It'd be really great to connect with more people. And as I said earlier, please do share from today. We want to see more conversation, more profile around South Asian Heritage Month. And yeah, anything that we can do. If there's something different that you want to see next year, if there's more that you'd like to see, if there's anything specific, then yeah, do drop it into the chat or feedback after the event, because it'd be really great to make this as big as everyone knows about Black History Month, which is coming up very soon. But how many people know about South Asian Heritage Month? Probably not helped by the slightly odd dates that have run in previous year to coincide with the dates of history. But now that it's just July, it should be a bit more straightforward. So oh, that's an interesting question from Ashanti. So how do you feel about being looked up to as role models? I think somebody needs to go on mute maybe. Or was that Ashanti? No?
No, it wasn't me.
Oh, sorry, Ashanti. So how do you feel to be looked up to as a role model? How does that make you feel?
probably
You have,
scared.
you have to get over the cringe in answering this question. That's one of the things that I think that's another probably South Asian trait. You get a compliment and you just feel all embarrassed about it, but fight the cringe to answer that question.
That is it, isn't it? It's just like, you know, your immediate thought is to kind of cringe about it, but it's definitely something that I think I have, particularly in the last couple of years, thought much more consciously about, and more about, I know that people, I know I'm in a very visible position and I need to be really mindful of that and really considerate of what I am outwardly showing to people. And I think it's a brilliant question, actually, because actually it's when I went on maternity leave, me and my manager, CFO, we had a very, very conscious discussion about how we were going to manage that process, because it was very visible to a lot of people. And I think it is something so important, because small things that you do that you might not think is a big deal can be very visible to other people. So, you know, how you treat people, what you choose to participate in, you know, how you show up every day, all of these things can be so impactful and powerful. So yeah, it's something that you don't want to kind of put yourself in handcuffs and not ever be able to say anything or do anything, or you know, as I said, not have fun. But I do think it's something that I do take quite seriously, because I know how much of an impact it can have on people.
I'm going to force both of you to answer this question as well. I want to hear from all of you, please.
Oh God, I mean, I would ward anyone off it doing exactly what you just said, Anna, like not being able to take a compliment like that. But no, it goes back to my original point around, I think, fostering more conversations. If you know, these are the roles that we're privileged to have, it's really important to use them to facilitate, I think, more conversations, more understanding. I think particularly at a senior level, making sure that particular senior level cohort really gets it, massively important. So if we're role models in that space, using that power to help people get to grips and really understand these things, I think, is on our shoulders.
Very much so. And Uzma?
Can I just go by what these guys said? No, I think, and it goes against the grain, right? But I think it's a really privileged place to be in. I think I've got a voice in terms of what I do from a kind of D&I perspective, and I want to use that for the right reasons. And whilst having fun, actually, what you'd said before, I think, but being mindful that it is quite a sensitive space as well, and that you do represent, and as scary as all that is, it's still a really nice place to be. And that's it. I have nothing else to say, Anna.
That's a lovely note to end on, I think. I think we're at the end of our questions from the chat, but lots of links to connect with people in the chat though, so do make sure you do that and follow iCAN. And yeah, if you've got any feedback that you'd like to share afterwards, please do so. But it's been a really lovely discussion, really great to hear from all three of you, so thank you for your time, and thank you for organising this iCAN as well. It's been a brilliant session. Thank you.